Hello everyone! My brother-in-law's son suggested that I should make an intro while rotating on my chair, so there it is. This is a game this is the second game I'm already showing on my channel from the very strong Zurich tournament of 1959, and I showed the game where Michael Tal beat the current Swiss champion Dieter Keller. I mean the current in 1959, and this is two rounds before the tournament ended. Bobby Fischer is playing against the Swiss national champion Dieter Keller, and from the beginning of this tournament, Bobby Fischer has been tied with Michael Tal for the score, and it was known that Fischer would play Tal in the last round and that Fischer would have the black pieces. And while Fischer was playing this game with Dieter Keller, Tal already defeated his opponent with a very quick victory, so Fischer was, he was obligated to win this game to stay tied with the score with Michael Tal. And Fischer definitely was the stronger player, but as it usually is, just being the stronger player doesn't win you the game. You also have to play good moves. So let's see this game. Fischer has the white pieces and Dieter Keller has the black pieces. We have e4 by Bobby, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. Bobby goes for the Ruy Lopez. a6, Morphy defense by Keller, bishop to a4, knight to f6, Fischer castles, bishop to e7, rook to e1, and b5. Bishop to b3, d6, c3, so all standard theory. Keller castles, Bobby goes for h3, knight to d7, and d4. We have knight to b6, and here Fischer plays d captures on e5, and this isn't really the best continuation for white, as too much exchanges will happen, and Fischer already played 2 games this year with this variation d captures on e5, and he didn't achieve much from the opening. Later, some 7 years after this game was played, Fischer played knight b to d2 in a game against Reshevsky, and this was a much better continuation. Fischer played d captures on e5, knight captures on e5, knight captures on e5, d captures on e5, and queen to h5. And it seems like an aggressive idea, but black is perfectly fine here. Bishop to f6, knight to d2 by Fischer, queen to e7, knight to f1, bishop to e6, we have knight to e3, and now g6, kicking the queen away from h5, queen to f3, and now grabbing that bishop on b3. Bishop captures on b3, a captures on b3, and the bishop to g7. And the black is perfectly fine here. We have b4. Fischer doesn't allow this pawn that is on a6 to move further, as he likes it on a6 on a light square, as this rook is the only piece defending it, and for now this rook is stuck on a8. We have c6, and here probably it's not that easy to find a good plan for white. Probably a move like rook to d1, followed by developing this dark square bishop somehow. But Fischer has to go for the win. As I said, Tal already won his game. He's up a full point ahead of Fischer, and Fischer goes for g3. He starts pushing his kingside pawns. Queen to e6, attacking h3, and h4. Keller pushes f5, and Fischer goes for h5. We have f4 by Keller, and now knight to f1. G captures on h5, queen captures on h5, and rook to f6. And as it usually is when you're pushing for the win in a drawn position, it's usually your opponent that gets the initiative, and it's usually for free. So knight to h2 by Fischer, and now we have rook to g6, pinning that pawn on g3. Knight to f3, and now f captures on g3. F captures on g3 and rook captures on g3. Fischer gave up a pawn, trying to get any sort of counterplay, maybe gaining that g file for himself, but it doesn't look likely. King to h2 by Fischer, and now Keller immediately goes for queen to g4. He's up a pawn, he wants to exchange queens, and he's definitely not going to lose this game. Queen captures on g4, rook captures on g4, and the strongest move in this position is definitely king to h3, attacking this rook, and either h5 will be played, or maybe moving the rook to g6. but Fischer went for rook to g1. And what's the idea? Trading pieces definitely goes into Keller's favor. Fischer was hoping that Keller will go for this e4 pawn, as after rook captures an e4 and bishop to h6, Fischer is back in the game, and this is, well, much better for white now. But after rook to g1, Keller, of course, doesn't grab the e4 pawn, as, he sees the threat of bishop to h6, and he just exchanges rooks. Rook captures on g1, king captures on g1, and now knight to a4. A brilliant move by Keller, as this knight to a4 move completely immobilizes Fischer's queenside. Now Fischer cannot develop this rook, as he can't move the bishop from c1. If he moves the bishop, he loses this pawn on b2. If he plays b3 to kick the knight, he loses the pawn on c3. So this knight, although he is on the edge of the board, he's completely destroying Fischer's queenside. King to f1 by Fischer, and now c5. We have b3. Now Fischer has to do something. Knight captures on c3, b captures on c5. Fischer does create a passed c pawn, but this loses another pawn. Knight captures on e4. We have c6, as the pawn was attacked, and now knight to c5, going for that b3 pawn. Also with threats of e4, with an attack on the knight and the rook on a1. So bishop to e3 is played, attacking the knight on c5. We have knight captures on b3, rook to a2, and a5. And it's, well, this is impossible to play for white, as Keller is up 3 pawns, but Fischer tries. Rook to g2, again going for bishop to h6, king to h8, unpinning, knight to g5. We have rook to f8, not allowing the knight to go to f7, king to e1, knight to d4. We have bishop captures on d4, e captures on d4, and now knight to e6, with the idea of tricking Keller once more, as now Fischer is attacking this g7 bishop twice with the rook and the knight, and he's inviting Keller to blunder. Keller goes for rook to e8, and it seems like Fischer managed to trick him. He plays c7, and what's the idea behind Fischer's move? Well, it seems like Keller can capture this knight with check, and after the king moves, he can play rook to c6 and then guard this pawn from queening. But this wouldn't work, as if rook captures on e6, you get rook to e2. And if you capture the rook now, you can't stop the pawn from queening. So if you play something like rook to c6, Fischer has rook to e8 with check. Only move is bishop to f8, capturing the bishop with check, king to g7, and now pawn to c8 with queen. Rook captures on c8, rook captures on c8. And although Keller would have 4 pawns for the rook, this is completely winning for Fischer, because the rook will capture all of these pawns on the queen side without a problem, and the king will stop this h pawn, and then the rook will simply shift his attention to the king side and win the game. But after c7, Keller of course doesn't fall for this, and he plays bishop to e5, now attacking the e7 pawn, and well, his bishop was attacked twice on g7. King to d2 by Fischer, and we have rook to c8. We have rook to g5 attacking the bishop, and now bishop captures on c7. And you can't pin the bishop with rook to c5. So maybe putting the king on a dark square wasn't that great of an idea, but I doubt this would work either way. If you play rook to c5, you get bishop to f4 check. Keller can exchange rooks. So after bishop captures on c7, rook to b5, capturing a pawn by Fischer, bishop to d6, king to d3, we have rook to a8, now rook to b6 is played, bishop to g3, rook to b7, and a4. And this is the moment when you realize that your opponent is definitely winning the game, as he starts to push his passed pawn. Knight to g5, Fischer is threatening to capture the pawn on h7, but Keller knows that this pawn doesn't really have a role to play in this game. So a3, rook captures on h7, king to g8, rook to h1, we have a2, rook to a1, now this rook is completely passive for the rest of the game, bishop to e5, protecting the d4 pawn, knight to e6, rook to a3 with check, king to e4, bishop to f6, king to f5, king to f7, defending the bishop, knight to g5 check by Fischer, and the bishop captures on g5. And in this position, Bobby Fischer resigned the game. Because, well, after, for example, king captures bishop on g5, you get b3, king f4, and d2. And, well, the king can't come any closer, but even if he did, it wouldn't matter. King f5, and now simply d1, grabbing a rook or the queen or pretty much any piece, wins the game. Rook captures, and now queen to a1, pawn to a1, queen, and this is completely winning. So yeah, after this bishop captures on after this bishop captures on g5, Fischer resigned the game, and well, in the end, Fischer did get third place. He was tied for third place with Paul Keres. Gligoric got second place, and Mikhail Tal got sole first place with 11.5 points. So it was an outstanding performance by Mikhail Tal, and well, the Swiss national champion Dieter Keller cost Fischer a tied first with Mikhail Tal. So yeah, this is the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.